Of all the challenges facing President Obama, none will be more difficult to solve than the basket case that is Pakistan. The Muslim nation, whose support is critical to the U.S. mission in Afghanistan, is not only broke and embroiled in another crisis with its archenemy India, it's now at war with Muslim extremists trying to destroy the government of President Asif Ali Zardari. The growing insurgency run by the Taliban and al-Qaeda is threatening the stability of a key U.S. ally that is believed to have as many as 100 nuclear weapons. For all of its 62 years, the government of Pakistan and its military have been obsessed with one thing: India, the enemy next door to the east, with whom it has fought 3 wars. And every day for 50 of those years, its soldiers at this border crossing have stared down their Indian counterparts as their flags are raised and lowered. But the biggest threat facing Pakistan today comes from within, from its lawless tribal territories on the western frontier, where the Taliban and al-Qaeda were allowed to regroup and carry out attacks against U.S. troops across the border in Afghanistan, and now against the Pakistani government. During the past year, Islamic extremists have launched more than 600 terrorist attacks inside the country, killing more than 2,000 people. This suicide bombing last September at the Marriott Hotel in the capital of Islamabad killed 60 people, just minutes away from the presidential offices, now occupied by a very unlikely leader, Asif Ali Zardari.
How important is stopping extremism?
I lost my wife to it, my children's mother, the most populist leader of Pakistan. It's important to stop them and make sure that it doesn't happen again and that they don't take over our way of life. That's what they want to do.
Zardari's late wife was Benazir Bhutto, who was supposed to be leading the country. But the former prime minister was assassinated, most likely by the Pakistani Taliban, after returning from exile 14 months ago. Until then, Zardari had spent more time in prison on corruption charges than he had in government service. But the parliament elected him president last fall, and he has spent much of his time dealing with the Taliban insurgency that has spread across the countryside.
They do have a presence in huge amounts of land in our side. Yes, that is the fact.
North of the capital, in an area known as Swat, the Taliban have seized control, terrorizing villages and imposing Islamic law. Beheadings are common. Signs in the marketplace read, "No women allowed." And a few weeks ago, the Taliban blew up 5 girls' schools.
Right now you have a situation in the Swat area. It's only 3 hours from Islamabad, where the Taliban is very strong there.
Agreed.
How did that happen?
It's been happening over time, and it's happened out of denial. Everybody was in denial that they're weak and they won't be able to take over, or they won't be able to give us a challenge. And our forces weren't increased, and therefore we have weaknesses. And they're taking advantage of that weakness.
For years, the Taliban were permitted to operate openly in the border regions of Pakistan. Their leaders even held news conferences. The government was unwilling to take them on politically or militarily. Now, Pakistan is facing a monster it helped create and has been forced to act. It's deployed 120,000 troops to clear the Taliban from their sanctuaries. We went with them to one of the most dangerous places in the world, the border area adjacent to Afghanistan's Kunar province, the Princeton of international terrorism, where many believe al-Qaeda's top leadership is being hosted by the Taliban. We landed in a place called Bajur, a district in the tribal territories that sits astride a major Taliban infiltration route and the scene of the Pakistani military's biggest offensive ever against the Taliban and al-Qaeda. General Tariq Khan is the commander of Pakistan's forces in the tribal territories.
We considered Bajor to be the center of gravity, from where the militants had access to Afghanistan.
What was the fighting like there?
We had to fight compound to compound, and every inch we had to take a hit.
What surprised you? What gave them their strength?
The numbers, the intensity, the kind of tenacity, the need to hold on to ground. There were no surrenders as much as people willing to die.
It's taken the Pakistani military 5 months of heavy fighting to gain a fragile foothold over an area about half the size of Rhode Island. When we were there last month, there was still sporadic sniper fire as the Frontier Corps cleared out the last pockets of resistance. They took us to this former Taliban command post less than 10 miles from the Afghanistan border to show us what they'd been up against. Inside the mud walls and beneath the compound was an intricate set of tunnels.
So these were like very deep bunkers.
Yes, these are very deep
And they are
bunkers.
linked to each other by more than mile.
You can see, you can go inside.
Okay.
Is it safe to go down here?
Yeah, why not?
The tunnels in the area were not only connected to underground rooms, but to other compounds and were deep enough to withstand artillery fire.
Where's the next tunnel?
The tunnels took years to build, an indication of how long the Taliban were allowed to flourish in Bajur.
Do you think it was a mistake not going up against the Taliban earlier?
I think we should have nipped the evil in the bud much earlier. We dilly-dallied, we hoped that it would go away.
It didn't work.
It didn't work. So,
But the Taliban is your enemy now.
yeah, they are. They have to be dismantled and they have to be destroyed.
Along with much of Bajur. After this battle, the Pakistani military brought in bulldozers to level the buildings that were still standing to make sure the Taliban didn't return. People who lived here have been relocated, along with 200,000 others, to refugee camps outside Peshawar, and the remnants of the Taliban have also moved on. Some of them to Momand, the next tribal district to the south. This Pakistani frontier outpost regularly fires artillery salvos at suspected Taliban enclaves. The Pakistani commanders walked us up a steep hill to point out where one of their outposts had been attacked by 600 Taliban soldiers just 3 nights earlier.
Is that the biggest attack that you've had here?
Yeah, it was the biggest attack that we faced.
The Pakistanis claim that 110 Taliban were killed that night, with only 6 losses to their side.
This was most probably one of their last ditch kind of effort.
But not everyone is so optimistic. Bruce Rydell, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, spent 30 years as a CIA analyst and has advised President Obama on the situation in Pakistan.
This is unprecedented to have this many Pakistani troops there. Unfortunately, almost all of them are not trained in counterinsurgency warfare. They're trying to use the tactics that they would use against the Indian Army, armored warfare, against an enemy that is an unconventional force.
How successful do you think it's been?
Most of the success has been along the main road. Once you get off the main road, you get into rural villages. There's very little lasting effect of this.
And it's not just rural villages. The Taliban are now operating on the outskirts of Peshawar, one of Pakistan's largest cities, 40 miles from the Afghanistan border. They have attacked police stations, military outposts, and destroyed hundreds of NATO vehicles. They have also mounted regular attacks on the convoys that snake their way through the Khyber Pass on the way to Afghanistan to resupply American troops, which get most of their weapons, ammunition, and food through this critical route. In December, the Pakistani army was forced to close it temporarily in order to root out the Taliban. But 12 days ago, the insurgents blew up a key bridge through the pass on the Pakistan side of the border. There are some in Washington who still question the commitment of the Pakistani military and its intelligence service, the ISI, to wage a war against fellow Muslims, and they question how much power President Zardari really has.
Do you have the support for this campaign against the Taliban? Do you have the full support of the military and the ISI?
If that wasn't the case, then Islamabad would have fallen. Because obviously, if the army doesn't do its job, these men are not restricted. They've blown up the Marriott Hotel before. They've attacked us inland before. They would be all around us, wouldn't they?
President Zardari said this is our war now, meaning Pakistan's war. Do you think he means it?
He understands it's his war now. He is yet to convince most Pakistanis that it's their war. The overwhelming majority of Pakistanis see this as America's war. They haven't bought into the notion that this is a threat to them yet.
There's a huge wave of anti-Americanism sweeping across Pakistan right now. Many of its 180 million citizens see the U.S. as an imperial power, like the former Soviet Union, meddling in a part of the world where they believe it has no business. Those feelings have been exacerbated by U.S. attacks against high-level al-Qaeda targets on Pakistan soil using unmanned Predator drones. Some of the attacks have been successful, but dozens, if not hundreds, of Pakistani bystanders have also been killed.
If we do that in America, will you accept it? So if you feel it is wrong, we are also human beings. We also feel that whatever you are doing, it is inhuman.
Khalid Khwaja is a former Pakistani intelligence officer and an influential Islamic firebrand who spent 7 months in prison last year for speaking out against the government. He is also a friend of Osama bin Laden.
When was the last time you spoke with him?
It's a long time back.
Long time back.
Yeah.
Where do you think he is?
See, even if I know, I will never tell you. So this is a question, you shouldn't ask me this question.
Do you think Zardari will aggressively go after Osama bin Laden?
I don't think so. Zardari has any power. Zardari is only a puppet of United States here. He is here only because of United States wanted him to be planted here.
We're not doing anybody a favor. Pakistan, the government of today, we are aware of the fact it's a Taliban trying to take over the state of Pakistan. So we are fighting for the survival of Pakistan. We are not fighting for the survival of anybody else.
The notion that the second largest Muslim country in the world, armed with 100 nuclear weapons, could fall under the influence of Islamic radicals is a nightmare the United States has been having for a while now. Today, it's never been more plausible.
The possibility of Pakistan being taken over by Islamic jihadists is a real one. A decade ago, most experts would have said it'll never happen. I think today most experts would say it's a possibility. It's become a serious possibility.